big one. Sexual boundary violation. I'm going to build up. So let's start from the subtle forms. A subtle form of a child's sexual boundary violation, not abuse, boundary violation would be when you're physically forcing a child to be intimate with a relative. Go give nanny a kiss. Go give this uncle a hug. Go squeeze them. Hugging and kissing children is a very gray area when they don't enjoy it. When they enjoy it, it's lovely and soulful if the adult has no alternative motives and if they have no negative agenda going in their minds. It's absolutely lovely to be intimately, physically close with children, even if they are not your children. They enjoy it. Children enjoy physicality, and they don't necessarily have those filters. They don't have those boundaries where it would be inappropriate to be physically intimate with another person. It's definitely a boundary violation when you're forcing a child to give a kiss, give a hug to someone that they don't feel comfortable around. And later on, it can come across in relationships, especially for females, but males as well, where you feel like that your partner is forcing you to have sex with them, or where you feel like that they are claiming your body. And just because you are in a relationship, they are entitled to have sex, or they are claiming ownership over your body and would seduce you or manipulate you or cajole you to do something that you feel physically incapable or uncomfortable of doing. And they can all originate in these very subtle forms of go hug this person that you don't want, go give this person a kiss that you don't want. It's definitely more than just physical boundary violation. There is an element of sexual intimacy in it that translates to the child's psyche and physiology as, in my intimate self, I don't have ownership. Now, obviously, a more pronounced version of sexual boundary violation would be sexual abuse or harassment or anything that now we're just socially growing up to understanding the nuances and the subtleties of sexual boundary violation. I'm going to give a very different example of my personal example. In my life, it happened twice. One was an isolated incident. One was a longer drawn out period of my life. One happened at the age of 17, I think, maybe 18, probably 17. One happened at the age of 19. Where if I take a step back and if I look at it from a completely objective point of view, especially with today's eyes, both of those instances are sexual abuse. As the perception, I did not feel abused. I still don't categorize those instances as abused. And I look at both of those instances as I've been able and I was in the right mindset to decide whether I want to consent or not. For not even a single second, I have not felt unsafe or insecure in those situations. I felt fully in control. If anything, I felt in that moment, not just after, in that moment, I felt insane empathy with the guy's need, very inappropriate need to do whatever they were doing. And I felt this weird curiosity because the situation itself was a new situation to a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old. I've never had those experiences before, where it was just like, I don't fully understand what you're doing. Or is it, oh yeah, oh yeah. And as soon as I felt like that this is starting to become uncomfortable, this is starting to feel unsafe, I immediately shut it down, and I had the agency to shut it down because it immediately stopped. So I'm not going to categorize anything as appropriate or inappropriate, anything as abusive or not abusive. I would say that children who are not able to consent, no form of sexual connection is okay to have with those children. I worked with males, specifically males, for a period of time who had very severe sexual addictions and very unhealthy sexual arousal triggers. And I had one guy who, from the age of 14, 15, he had, I'm reluctant to say abuse because he claimed that he enjoyed those times. He had sexual relations with multiple, much older males. And he himself would never categorize those instances as abuse. Where I draw the line is that to this day, this man, who's now well in his 70s maybe, has severe issues with intimacy. He does not have a fulfilling intimate relationship in his life. His present day sexual behavior is completely wrapped around, his entire sexual life is consumed by an addictive behavior around sexuality. Still to this day, he claims that those times were the happiest or most fulfilling or most exciting sexual times in his life. When he was 14, 15, having sexual contact with much older males. Totally inappropriate. On every level, totally inappropriate. Absolute boundary violation. Yet, his psyche was not able to categorize it as boundary violation. His current behavior is showing the signs of boundary violation. His current relationships are forming a pattern that is clearly an outcome of violated boundaries. In his way of categorizing his experience, he would never say that he felt abused. So the topic of sexual abuse, I'm feeling like, oh, this is heavy. The topic of sexual abuse is incredibly nuanced. Sexual boundary violation is a very, very murky territory. And I personally have a huge empathy, especially with males. If anything, my sexual behavior or sex drive or appetite is much closer to a male's than the average female's. So I've always had much broader empathy with male sexual behavior than with female sexual behavior. Just that's how I'm wired. So I understand the need, the desire. I understand the underlying urge and the lack of healthy modeling in their minds what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Adults with children, no amount of sexual contact is appropriate. Just not. It's not going to be ever okay because you're playing on a human need to be intimate with a very inappropriate partner. It's clearly a sign when an adult is trying to establish any form of sexual contact with a child, with a minor. It is a clear sign that their boundaries at some point, maybe not sexually, but somehow have been violated, and they've never learned this healthy sense of self. They never learned how to connect with another age-appropriate and context-appropriate partner in a healthy, intimate way. And therefore, they are picking someone whose boundaries are much more vulnerable and malleable and a lot more murky than a healthy, well-adjusted adult's would be. But I have to admit, there is a very fine line between children when it is between children. if one of the child is more more of an adult, or an older age, or just more of a mature child, whether that's a girl, whether that's a boy, and they are forcing or coercing or manipulating the other child to do something with them, for them, not okay. Totally not okay. But there is an age-appropriate, context-appropriate, healthy interest, desire in children that sometimes develops from a very early age. And I genuinely don't think that that is healthy to shut down or police or say that this is inappropriate. So it all depends on context. If there is an age-appropriate, context-appropriate exploration of physical intimacy, I personally believe that that's something that we should somehow help guide and navigate, so that they wouldn't have that imprint that sex is bad, or this is wrong, or the way that I'm feeling is not okay. Because that imprint, which would have been a perfectly normal and healthy situation for a curious child, can later on come across as I'm picking the partners who are looking right through me, or I'm attracted to completely unavailable people, or I never feel sexually fulfilled or satisfied. Even in a relationship, I don't dare to express my needs, my wishes, my boundaries. I don't dare to say that this is not okay with me. I don't dare to say that I want something more. They can be ingrained in situations that would have been a perfectly normal and healthy exploration of your own sexual boundaries, but a fear was instilled in you by someone who thought that, blanket term, no sexual context is okay for any child. Some context is, in my opinion, okay, but none of the imbalanced context is okay. No amount of age gap is okay in my book. An adult version of sexual boundary violation, not abuse, sexual boundary violation, would be along the lines of love bombing, stalking your ex, sexually manipulating each other. And if you look around in this society, I can't remember who it was, but I have a very vague feeling of it had to do something with John Wineland's sexual detox and feminine detox for males, where he just goes something for like 6 months or for a year, just withdraw from all forms of feminine contact and from a feminine energy to reinstate your own masculine integrity, which, you know, it's based on the application. It can be a good thing or not such a good thing. And I remember there was this one guy, again, I don't remember who it was, where he went to a Subway, and like the sandwich shop Subway, and they had an advert where like just a woman is sexily eating a sandwich, and he was in the middle of this detox thing or some form of his own sexual detox. It might not have been the John Mayer thing. And he just goes, immediately it triggered explosive anger in him, because he thought that he is not safe anywhere in this world, because he's going to be sexually excited and manipulated and maliciously forced to have sexual thoughts and sexual feelings, even if he doesn't want to. And this society is using sex to sell in sometimes very boundary violating ways, sometimes very cajoling and coercing and manipulative ways. So the entire topic of sexual boundary violation is an incredibly nuanced topic. And I'm really hoping that we'll have more and more voices in the conversation, so that it's more of a forum instead of just shouting hashtags at each other or blaming each other for our very natural desires, or trying to shut down any form of intimacy or any form of healthy contact, because that is an extreme response to a trauma. similarly, I'm going to say something very controversial here, similarly to how feminism is an extreme response to not being able to express your femininity. Feminism as a political movement, as an economical movement, is an incredibly useful and valuable tool for women to have economical. What's the word that I'm looking for? Oh God, skip my mind. Equality. Boom. That's how unequal I feel. No, I'm kidding. The flavor of feminism that we're doing right now is a very healthy tool for economical equality. But it is nowhere near any useful tool for reinstating femininity. Feminism has nothing to do with femininity, because if anything, it makes women act more masculine. That's just my rant about it, that some reactions to a trauma response, to years and decades and eons of suppression and neglect and abuse, the response sometimes can be quite fiery. And it might be just drawn with very broad brushstrokes. It might not be the most nuanced answer. It might not be the appropriate reaction, the right reaction. It is a reaction. It is definitely moving the conversation forward, but I would love to have a much more nuanced and subtle conversation around sexual health and intimacy and the meaning of intimate connection.